People are often toying with the concept of commercial property. Do they buy a commercial property? Do they buy a residential property? What's the difference? We're going to tell you within a couple of minutes the differences and whether you should or should not do it. That's up to you.
Good morning to you.
Hi, Billy. Hi, Billy the Kid. How are you?
Well, I wish I could tell you I was good this morning, Mark, but I would be lying because I suffered quite a humiliating defeat last night in an arm wrestle with the boss.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't even think.
Well, the thing is, I was I didn't want to get myself into this awkward situation. However, when it happened, and after a couple of seconds, I realized I probably wasn't going to win. I thought it's better to try and slow down the loss rather than make it pretty quick. So at least I didn't get a humiliating defeat.
I think people underestimate the good old settling of stuff by an arm wrestle. Like it's an age-old way to settle things, and we did that last night at 8 o'clock at Novak HQ, across the table of two workspaces, and you got smashed.
Well, it was slowed, but yeah, I did lose.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this morning's topic.
Commercial real estate versus resi real estate. This is an interesting one because they're both real estate, but from what I can tell, hugely different.
Massively.
So, first of all, the biggest sort of difference that I've sort of heard of is it's a sort of different kind of landlord and tenant that you're dealing with, first of all. It's almost like a different version of the game.
It's all different, isn't it? Like the same it's all different that, your lending's different. Everything's different. Your agent's different.
Yeah, true. So I've got a few quick fire points for you this morning.
Yep.
First of all, is it difficult to get lending, or is it what? Okay, let me backtrack. It seems to be that it's a little bit of a hidden gem, this commercial real estate, because is it the fact that people are uneducated that people are not doing it more?
Yes.
Because I was talking with one of our commercial agents last night, and he was running me through some of the numbers, and I was pretty amazed, I'm not going to lie, with first of all how much more inexpensive it is to get into. You know, you can get a smaller office space, for example, half the price of an apartment, but similar sort of rental return. So what is the main difference? Is lending harder to get, first of all?
Yeah, it's generally you'll need 50% more equity for a commercial property. So if you're buying it, so LMI is when anytime you're borrowing more than 80%, you have to pay lender's mortgage insurance. So generally, let's just stay within the no LMI zone, which means you've got a 20% deposit for a residential. You'll need a 30% deposit for a commercial, which means you need 50% more of a deposit if you don't want to be paying lender's mortgage insurance on a property. Good morning to Luke. How are you? Good morning to Sean. Guys, thanks for watching live show. Any comments, ask away. Thank you for your comments. But yeah, so lending wise, now also what a lot of people don't consider, Billy, is you lose 1% on your interest rate, or maybe 2%. So when you're borrowing on resi, you will probably secure a loan for about 2.5 to 3%. When you are borrowing on commercial, your loan will most likely be, more around that 3.5%, 4%.
Interesting. Do you think it's...
And before we move on, your loan term can be shorter. So you may find that on a residential, they'll happily do a 30-year loan, but you may find on a commercial, they may approve you for 10 years or 20 years or something, not as long, which then dramatically changes your assessment rate on you and your portfolio, or what you own.
Interesting. Do you think, and Luke put it there, do you think commercial's not quite as simple as resi real estate then? More moving parts, maybe?
You know what? I think it's a familiarity thing where, everyone around the dinner table can have an old-fashioned residential conversation. We've grown up with it. We live in it. Mum and dad have done it. Whereas I think to find out that equal amount of information, I always talk about knowing 10,000 things about a suburb. You should probably know 10,000 things about buying residential already by the time you're 25. But you don't know those 10,000 things about commercial property when you're 25. And to learn those things are very easy, very possible, but it takes time.
Yeah, okay. Luke reckons when you're getting into sort of anything, obviously it's best to do it in small amounts first. But would you say, for what we call a first home buyer, would you use, say if you had sort of the option of $500,000, would you get a small apartment somewhere, or would you get a small office space? If lending didn't come into it, purely on like return, things like that.
I don't think you can exclude lending out of it because it's just a known commodity. Do you know what I mean? Like it just has to be done. It's part of it. So, but to answer your question directly, I'd still buy residential.
Okay. So you think maybe it's something to add to the portfolio once you're maybe a little bit more established?
Yeah, I think also what I noticed, it's a maturity thing. It's a financial maturity thing where people in their, I guess on the spectrum of lending and family and cash flow and loans and equity and that sort of stuff, I think what actually happens is people that have an appetite for a property, they get to a point where they actually, the bank just goes, it's a no from me. And they go, why? And they go, the bank says, well, you've got plenty of equity, you've got big deposit, you've got plenty of cash in your properties, equity in your property, but your wage isn't enough to buy your next property. And I think as you get older, you realise that actually you can't spend your equity. So it's like, I'm 55 or 65. I've bought a couple of properties along the way, but I can't live off the rents because I have to sell something. So then I notice people's appetite for cash flow, i.e. better rents, starts happening. Sometimes they'll trade out of the residential property in order to buy those commercial properties, or often they'll just change the way they're buying, and then they'll start buying commercial property rather than residential property because they're generating themselves a better income that they can live off when they're in their 50s, 60s and 70s. So I do find that people's appetite changes the second half of their financial life because they're chasing cash flow more than equity, and here comes commercial property.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Does do you think so? You think cash flow is a big part of that? Rental yield is another one that came up in conversation last night. It seems to be, and let's get your opinion live on air. What do you reckon a fantastic rental yield is for a commercial property? Percentage
7 or 8%.
Versus resi in this crazy market where everything's just shot up?
4.5%.
And that's what I was trying to, that's what I couldn't really get my head around last night. I was thinking, wow, that's huge.
Yeah, well, don't don't forget to achieve that rent. You've got to spend 50% more on your deposit on commercial.
Yeah.
Don't forget that your interest rate, you're going to lose 1% on your interest rate or 1.5% on your interest rate because of commercials more expensive on an interest rate. So you're giving that away to the bank. And then don't forget that I think your capital growth will also be a little bit better with a residential. It generally just, I see hard stories with commercial capital growth, i.e. haven't made as much money more than I do with residential capital growth. So I think there's a lot more certainty locked into your property value going up when it's commercial. So when you consider those money-making factors, when you're talking about yield, like money-making, you've got to look at all those things.
Yeah, because capital growth was my next question. Do you see the like the trends in the resi market go and sort of similar sort of trends in the commercial market?
No.
As in when you're looking like a 10-year average?
Yeah, I would definitely say landlords of commercial enjoy a better yield and don't get as much capital growth. That's for sure. But it's probably good for those profile of people because that's what they're seeking. They're seeking, we don't care about the value going up as hardcore. We want to see money in our pocket every week, every month, every year. So they're almost getting that capital growth up front, in a way.
Another big one that's a pretty obvious difference is the importance of a tenant, a good tenant. Now, in resi real estate, obviously, it's beneficial to have a tenant that's in there for a long time, looks after the property like their own. That gives a load of certainty, but it doesn't change the value of the property too much. With commercial real estate, it clearly does make a huge difference, and that's for when you're going to sell it on as a tenanted investment.
Clever you picked that up because it is it's definitely the case where it's indexed. So if I've got a crap residential rent or a really good residential rate, morning Michelle, how are you? Luke saying I think where is the deal now with your financeability? Yeah, a lot of it's like that. Take baby steps when you're Billy's age. But to answer your question, your rent's definitely indexed off. Just give me 1 sec. Your rent's definitely indexed off. No one really gives a crap about your residential rent. They know they can sort that out. But when it comes to a commercial rent, you'll just get punished on your price. You know what I mean? So if your commercial rent is awesome, then your price will be indexed off that. But if your residential rent is awesome, it doesn't really translate across to your price like that.
So have you seen a space that has had an average tenant, a commercial space with an average tenant, then get a little bit of work done, an amazing tenant came in and it's just hugely lifted the value? All
the time. And there are commercial people that have buyers that have an appetite for vacant properties. They're risk adverse. They don't, they're like, we see the value. We know we're going to get a good tenant here. They may do a slight renovation. They do nail it with the tenant and off it goes. And, like one of those ones was in DY where the client buy a brand new vacant property at the bus stop. It was obviously a great position. And then Taco Bell came in, did $1 million fit out, and signed up a nice fat long lease, and the value of his property grew extraordinarily. But he took a big risk on. He had the property vacant. It was an unknown commodity. It had never been rented before. So good on him.
Yeah. Last question, Mark. do you see different types of commercial real estate perform better than others? For example, we've had the debate of a two-bedroom apartment performs better than the one bedroom. Do you see office space perform better than warehouse or shop space, retail? What's your thoughts on that?
Look, I must admit, I'm not the most experienced. I'm as experienced as the Northern Beaches. So, there's a lot of real estate trusts that, manage entire office buildings, and there's a lot of different styles of commercial that I don't do. So I sort of only know what I know, which is, industrial Northern Beaches, commercial Northern Beaches, offices, retail, that sort of stuff. But it's amazing that it really, it's not as much the better performer. I would say it's the better the expertise of the buyer. So you just find that often, like the chicken shop guy will look for the places with grease, and he'll have a good eye for buying commercial properties that are retail, that have grease and exhaust. So it's the profile of the buyer that I think that are really the winners in that. So it's almost like they brain it, or they Da Vinci code the whole thing because they understand it better than most of the market. But, are there better performing sectors in the Northern Beaches more than others? I would probably say, and a lot of people are going to hate this, but I would probably say Torrens title over strata title is a definite. And my first boss always stressed that to me. Generally you're always going to do a lot better. Sometimes you don't have a choice and you just have to buy the strata investment. It just works for you as a buyer. But definitely I'd say it would be the star performer out of the two, because you can truly add value and you don't have to ask neighbours or anyone else in the strata for permission. You can sort of do what you want to add value.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, legend. Hopefully it helps someone out there.
I reckon that was pretty interesting. I definitely learned something.
Jonathan, good morning, buddy. There he is. All right, mate. Well, you take care, and we'll speak. We'll see you in the office.
Yes, sir. No more arm wrestles, though.
No more arm wrestle, because you'll get smashed now. You've been spanked.
Next time that happens, you're losing. I'm gonna make sure. Mum said it's proof of how much time I spend here, Mark, because I'm never at the gym anymore.
I think it's a proof of me getting a bit old, because I struggled. I've got to do push-ups. All right, mate.
Ciao.
Take care. See you. Bye.